He loved the outdoors. He loved to hike and ski, and canoe, and cook out, and camp out. And the habits he formed at your age sustained him his whole life. He loved the arts. He loved drama and nature, all the beauty that God creates. And those things, in fact, were his lifeline during difficult times. And he had difficult times. Despite a middle-class upbringing that was generally happy, his childhood was filled with heartbreak. When he was in 3rd grade, his mother died. And before he entered high school, his beloved and only brother, whom he adored and imitated, died suddenly from scarlet fever. But these tragedies didn't keep John Paul down. After all, he still had his father, he had his faith, and he had his friends. And in fact, those friendships he made during his high school years were maintained until he died. And so there's a lesson for each one of you students here. Make an effort to keep these friendships that you formed here on this campus, because in life, you need your friends. You need friends who will bring out the best in you and not the worst in you. I will tell you, in my experiences on college campuses, I've seen many times how students rise or fall depending on the company they keep. So trust me, the people that you'll hang out with on campus will either bring out the best in you or the worst in you. Make sure you seek out people that are helping you, not hurting you. Back to John Paul. Now we're at a point in his life where he was like you seniors. He was about to graduate from high school. He was all set to enroll in one of Europe's oldest and finest universities in Krakow. And in fact, he did. But little did he know on the day of his high school graduation that a year later, his world would be turned upside down. You're not thinking of that now. Of course, you've got your plans. John Paul sat there like you did, not knowing a year from his graduation, his world would change dramatically. And he'd be exposed to cruelty of mankind at its worst when the Germans invaded Poland. And they quickly came to his campus, rounded up 184 of his professors, shipped them off to a concentration camp, closed the university, and forced all able-bodied men like him to work or be deported. This turn of events made a godly, tough man even stronger. John Paul was assigned to a quarry where he did back-breaking labor. He was so poor, he had only wooden shoes with which to walk the 30 minutes that he had to walk each day to the mine, and he often worked at night. In the winter, the temperature was so cold, as much as 20 degrees below zero, that he had to rub petroleum jelly on his face to keep his skin from freezing while he walked to work. Put simply, life in German-occupied Krakow was nearly unbearable. One of his neighbors described it this way. He said it was like this: police roundups, deportation to camps, forced labor, beatings by SS men, death, shooting in the streets. All these were part of daily life. We were hungry for 5 years without break, and each winter we were desperately cold. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse for John Paul, it did. 6 months after he started work at the quarry, at the age of 20, his father died. Now he was all alone. He had no family. His college dreams shattered. His dreams gone. All his bright promise seemed utterly destroyed. And then it got worse. One night while walking home, shortly after his father died, after doing a double shift at the factory, John Paul was struck by a truck driven by a German soldier, knocked unconscious, left lying on the road, bloodied and battered. Now men, pause for a second and picture John Paul laying there, bleeding to death, on this lonely road, thought to be dead, with no family, seemingly no future. Who possibly could have seen in that man, on that road, the future hope? John Paul was great. For any person experiencing the kind of sudden reversal of fortune that John Paul experienced, the loss of his dad, nearly the loss of his own life, you would think that would catapult him away from God. He'd be angry with God, you would assume. He would be tending toward despair. But in fact, it was his faith, his love of the Blessed Mother, his appreciation of beauty, his love of his friends, his intellect, that he forged through a good education, those were the things that helped him survive and make the most of his situation, the most of his life. He knew from his habits of prayer that God loved him tenderly and had not forgotten him, and in fact was with him. He never lost hope. And it's true, the life he thought he was going to have when he graduated from high school, he didn't end up having. But he was a man, a godly man who never gave up. And that's the first thing and most important thing about these heroes. They never give up. And Jesuit men never give up. It's true that I've worked in some high places in my life, and some would say my life's been successful. When I'm hearing him recite the different things I've done, all that's proof of is I can't hold a job. But when I reported directly to the President of the United States and would meet with him in the Oval Office, I had the opportunity to travel with Mother Teresa to numerous places in the world. A lot of these different experiences didn't teach me a lot. The truth is, I learned a lot more from failure than I've learned from success. Don't be afraid of failure. Don't be afraid of disappointment. I've been fired twice from jobs. When I was your age, when I started off as a freshman, my dream was to play basketball at Bishop Kenny. That was my dream. I was a great 8th grade player, but puberty didn't hit on time. In 9th grade, I was 4'10" and I weighed 85 pounds. And puberty still hasn't hit my voice. So I got cut from the basketball team. Huge disappointment. I was being dissed by girls that were this much taller than I was. But you learn a lot from failure. It tests you. It makes you dig deep and find out who you are, find out who your friends are, and find out things about yourself. So if you failed at something at Jesuits, and if you fail at things in college, don't quit. Dust yourself off, keep dreaming, keep giving it your all. The only losers are the ones who quit. So never give up. In college, you might fail in the classroom. And worst of all, you might fail morally. And you know well the stories of binge drinking and the hookup culture from America's colleges and university campuses. And also the ubiquitous pornography where danger is just a click away. And that often traps young men like you in dangerous addictions and makes you slaves. So some of these studies that you see today at universities and colleges show that Catholic kids, even in Catholic colleges, are no different sometimes from other students in these habits. So my advice to you is, when you have a moral failing, cling fast to what you learned here at Jesuit and what it means to be a man of faith and a follower of what's true and beautiful. And don't quit. If you're Catholic, you go to confession and you seek reconciliation with God. You become reconciled and reclaim your dignity. And in the process, you will become people of conviction and courage who know what it's like to fail and to not quit. I've got 5 kids. We had 4 straight boys, and they came first, and then our home was finally civilized with the girl. So we got a foursome and then a card girl. When they were young, when our kids were young, I used to take them to the Atlantic Ocean. And I would have them stand there on the shore there in Jacksonville, and I'd point out in the water, out at a raft that's floating out there. And I'd say, see that raft? And they'd all look at the raft. And I'd say, now watch the raft. And in just a matter of moments, the raft wasn't here anymore. It was over here. It was over here. And I wanted to teach them how currents work and how the raft that was once here had moved here. And I was trying to teach them that you had to be aware of that and to resist the current. I wanted them to be in front of me so that I didn't have to go move in case they were drowning. I wanted them to drown right in front of me. So, but when you think about those currents in an ocean and how they move imperceptibly and drag you to places where you don't want to go, and some of them can drag you into deep trouble. They're called undertows, where they can nearly destroy your life. And those kind of currents that you see in an ocean, you also see on a college campus. That there are cultural currents that will drag you down. So you have to resist those currents. You have to fight against them. And the first step is to simply be aware of them, that there are those kind of currents and temptations. And you're going to enter those kind of environments. Be prepared for it. And of course, the second is to know that you have to resist it. If you don't resist it, you will succumb to it. Trust me. I've watched young men come to colleges and watched what happens. So So I want you to think about that and think about how to find your way. Maybe it's not an ocean experience for you. Maybe it's a forest, a deep, thick forest that college is. And if that's the case, you need a compass. You need to find your way. You need to know right from wrong. And I think Jesuits taught you these lessons. Jesuits have been doing this for 460 years, teaching men like you and women on how to know right from wrong. I'll tell you a quick story about Mother Teresa. When my wife was pregnant with our third child, we were living in Tallahassee. And she was coming to Washington, D.C., and so I thought Mary and I would